Evening. There we go. That's also for you all, but also for the mic. How are you doing? All right, we like the energy up. You've made it all the way here. If you're not from Harlem, if you made it from Brooklyn, I know that's almost like a long distance trip. So, we might as well all be here together in good spirits. My name is Novella Ford, and I'm the Associate Director of Public Programs and Exhibitions. And we are here at the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture, where every month is Black History Month. Yeah. Happy Black History Month to all those who celebrate. For those who don't, you should get into it. It's kind of fun over here on this side of the world. For 100 years, with its origins at the 135th Street Library, the Schomburg has been the intellectual heart of Harlem. And we thank you for contributing to the communities that affirm our work every day. I want to thank you all for being here in person, as well as those who are watching online, for unboxing Legacies, our stuff, our stories. Let me also thank all of the community members who shared some of their heirlooms and collectibles with us for the first part of the event, Community Heirlooms and Histories Showcase. Do you all think that we should do that again? It was really, really quite beautiful hearing people tell their stories, and I think once given the invitation, right, more people would want to do so. I'm looking forward to today's conversation. Actually, these are some folks that I've really been looking forward to having in conversation, and so to have them join us for during our 100th anniversary celebration is particularly important, because an institution that's been around for 100 years means that it has seen so many different ways in which archives appear and how we collect those things. And so to know that Black Market Vintage and Black Archives Co. are really two spaces that have had these lives online that have helped to bring in a whole nother generation, or just a whole nother group of people, into what does it mean to collect, what does it mean to value those things in your home, what does it mean to value those things that are culturally specific and maybe feel like, oh, that was just in my grandmother's bathroom. I'm referencing something very specific. I think I've read all the Ebony magazines as a result of them sitting in my grandmother's bathroom, because I love the bathroom. And so between Jet and Ebony, I understood what happened in Black history for a period of time. But to know that those were collectibles and things that we should hold on to, as my grandmother did, these are just platforms that have really helped to reinforce this kind of collecting and valuing and validating of our own experiences and what we have in our homes. So to that extent, I just want to tell you all just a little bit about a few programs that are coming up in the next couple of weeks, but also, if you haven't, we do have our exhibitions and program brochure for this season that is up. But of course, you can always find things online, and I'll tell you where you can do that. But tomorrow, these next few events are actually afternoon events. Tomorrow we have Black on Screen films by William Greaves, and this is part of a really exciting series that we've been doing during the centennial to help bring people into the rest of what we collect. Of course, people think about manuscripts, books, paper material, but we also collect moving images, audio-visual, photographs, artwork, and so much more. On February 9th, we have continuing our series, Century of Black Theater Making, Hits and Bits, with a feature on P.J. Gibson. Again, we are mining our collections for underutilized collections and helping people to understand, and other kinds of makers and creators to understand what kind of things we have in our collection. So we have an incredible Black theater set of materials that go across collections like Ruby Dee and Ossie Davis. There's a script collection. There are New Federal Theater. I would be remiss if I did not mention the passing of Woody King Jr., who was a legend and a giant in the Black theater space and theater space. So if you all could just give a warm round of applause for the legacy that he has left us. The New Federal Theater has been our collaborator around our Hits and Bits series, and so our hearts go out to his entire family, colleagues, as well as friends who understand and value all that he has poured into that industry. And the last program I'll mention is another Black on Screen. This one is Pan-Africanism in Practice. And the film that we'll be screening is John Henrik Clarke, A Great and Mighty Walk, and he's a Pan-Africanist. He was a Pan-Africanist, a historian, a professor. And if you don't know much about his work, this will be a great way to learn more, but also, of course, visit your library, and you can find books. You can find books he's written. You can find books that have been written about him. But this particular series kicks off in celebration of Black History Month, Stand Up, Fight Back, which is a series curated by Kazembe Balagoon, who is the executive director of the Maisel Documentary Center here in Harlem. And it chronicles histories of Black American and Afro-diasporic coalition building and resistant movements on screen, narrated by intersectional voices. Last, I should tell you to save the date for May 7th, where we will open a new exhibition titled To Uncover and Reveal to the World Arturo Schomburg's Library. And so, as many of you all know, the Schomburg Center was seeded with Arturo Schomburg's collection back in 1926, so that's the second part of our centennial celebration. And 10,000 items came to the Schomburg Center. We have begun to excavate what was in that seed collection, and so this exhibition is just a taste of what was in those early, in that early collection when it came here to the Schomburg Center. So please save the date, May 7th, for our public opening. Again, we have the brochure where you can learn more about our upcoming programs. You could also visit schomburg.org/100. If you will, please take this time to silence your cell phones, and if you're looking to share tonight's program, it is available online at youtube.com/the Schomburg Center. Again, that's youtube.com/the Schomburg Center. I continue to be grateful that we get to convene communities of scholars, artists, performers, and educators to discuss and preserve Black culture and illuminate the relevancy of the past to the future. So I'm going to introduce our guests this evening and have them join us soon. First, Brooklyn natives Kiyanna and Jannah Handy founded Black Market Vintage in November of 2014. With over 20 years of collecting and picking experience combined, they both have an affinity for vintage wares and the narratives inherent in Black folks' cultural production throughout history. Jannah and Kiyanna are also the authors of Black Market Vintage, Reclaiming Objects and Curiosities That Tell Black Stories. It was published in October of 2024, and we will have books available in our makeshift Schomburg shop, as it has been cold in the shop, so they have stepped outside of the shop to have a little pop-up shop, and we will have a book signing in the Langston Hughes lobby. Also joining them is Renata Cherlise, who is a multidisciplinary, research-based visual artist who uses various mediums to explore themes of identity, family, and culture. Cherlise's work seamlessly bridges her Southern upbringing with contemporary methodologies in digital and physical spaces while reimagining notions of the Black experience. Her archival project, Black Archives, has evolved from a photo-based website of visual narratives into a collaborative platform featuring archival histories and modern-day stories from across the African diaspora. I would be remiss to not mention we will also have her book available in our pop-up Schomburg shop, and will also be joining us for the book signing following this program. Moderating this evening's conversation is Kei Williams, who was born in upstate New York. They are a queer transmasculine organizer, artist, and historian. Kei currently works with New Pride Agenda as the Director of Programs and Strategic Initiatives. In 2021, Kei was selected as a Community Fellow through the Mellon Initiative for Emerging Scholars at the New School, where they also co-teach a media theory course and was honored with the Black Voices for Black Justice Award in 2022. As a leader in the fight for racial and gender justice, Kei joined Black Gotham Experience in November 2016, a visual storytelling project elevating the impact of the African diaspora by remembering together through walks, talks, and artistic commissions such as Fighting the Dark and More Than a Book. As a founding member of Black Lives Matter NYC and part of the movement NetLab, Kei has developed has developed to shape powerful campaigns and develop practical tools to scale up movements grounded in abolition, democracy, and love. Please welcome Kiyanna and Jannah Handy, Renata, Cherlise, and Kei Williams as they kick off the rest of this conversation.
All right, good evening. Nah, we from the Black Church. Good evening. There we go. Y'all journeyed all the way here. I journeyed all the way here from Albany, so, it's been a day, to say the least. But I am glad to be here with all of you tonight for the conversation on bouncing legacies, our stories, our stuff, our stories. And thank you all to my great panelists here. And we're going to go ahead and jump right in for the conversation. And one of the things, especially as an organizer, and I think it's really common language, people often say the work. I do the work, right? And so what I would love to hear, starting with Jannah and Kiyanna, and then Renata as well, please add in, what were your personal entry points to the work that you, both your collectives prospectively do, right? Share how each of you came into the work, for Black Market Vintage as collectors, as storytellers through objects, and then for Black Archives as a living, digital resource and storytelling platform. And whoever would like to start us off.
It's so good to be here with y'all tonight. Thank you for being here. My name is Kiyanna. I'm one half of the Black Market Vintage duo, and I so appreciate this question and it being framed around the doing of the work. Audre Lorde is not only literary mother and inspiration and a guide and North Star. I often think about her question, are you doing your work? Not the work, are you doing your work? And my work, my and my wife's work, is around collecting, preserving, keeping, sharing objects that tell Black stories, bridging the past and the contemporary through various projects, be it interiors, be it activations, be it museum or institutional loans. But our work is very much so in the business of Black folks, our stories, our humanity, and our lived experience and interiority. And that work has expanded. I mean, we were founded in 2014, and at that point we were dating for a year, 2 years, and decided that we wanted to create a business that would be the Blackest vintage shop that we always wanted to shop in, but didn't know existed, couldn't find one. So we created the thing that we wanted to see in the world. And it's been an incredible journey seeing the work, our work, expand and grow and lean into a lot of our differences. We both have very different multidisciplinary backgrounds. I went to school for journalism and women's studies and Africana studies and was trying to figure out how to bridge all of those things as someone who's also interested in fashion and design. And Jannah's background is different, and she can share that with y'all, but it has allowed us to tap into all of these different ways and like modes that Black folks have articulated themselves and explored themselves. And so I see our work today as expansive. There's an online shop and an opportunity for folks to buy and take things home. But even if you don't spend a dime, there's the opportunity to reflect, to engage in memory, to be enticed by nostalgia, to be brought home. And I love that we get to provide that for folks.
Definitely. And excuse me, for me, the way that I came to this work was through my wife. She was my wife at the time. But I have 3 other sisters. So like the idea of like hand-me-downs and like secondhand, it was not my jam. So like going to thrift stores and getting things that other people owned, I was just like, I'm gonna just get something new. And so I didn't really see the value until I met Kiyanna. And so we were both working in residence life on a college campus, and so I go into her residence life apartment, and it doesn't look like a dorm room. The walls are painted crimson, there's all this wood and Victorian vintage furniture, and I was just like, number one, how did you get all this in here? And I think this is like code violation, but whatever. But then the other part, I was just like, wait, you were able to do all this from a thrift store on a budget, which I love, and also it has style. It's not just like doilies and, you know, white men in gold frames. I was just like, wait, you can actually do something with this? And so while Kiyanna was my entry point into it, my imagination really is what brought me into the world, because I saw so much opportunity in all the pieces that we were able to collect with each other. So I think in a nutshell, that was my entry point. So just like vintage as a universe, honestly.
And I just want to add one thing, just speaking to the entry point. My mom was my entry point. My mom dragged me to estate sales, to garage sales, to flea markets, thrift shops. We were stopping on the side of the road and putting stuff in the back of the car, in the van. But she really saw beyond objects. She was trying to get a deal. She was interested in things that were unique and storied, and I didn't get it at the time. But now, being 36, I just reflect on how much vision she had and how interesting she wanted to like create her space and her life. She was like, I could go to Home Goods. I actually go to Home Goods and I'm gonna find this joint off the side of the road and make it new for myself. And to her credit, this business exists.
Renata?
Yeah, I like that. I love it actually, because it reminds me, thank you all for being here. My name is Renata Cherlise. I'm a memory worker, family archivist. You know, I do all of the things. My entry point, I would say, comes from a lineage of Black women who pass down stories, who preserve stories, who pass them on to me. Unfortunately, some of the men in my family, they passed away prematurely. And so the women were the ones that were there to tell the stories, right? And so here I come into the picture without, you know, a formal degree in archives, things of that nature. But I do remember my dad, you know, before he passed on, he was the person that documented, you know, all of our family events. There was a point when I had like so many camcorder footage to digitize, and you know, all of our home movies and all of our photographs. And so yeah, I say that my entry point is from a lineage of Black women who pass down stories. I also will share that for Black Archives, I launched it in 2015. And I launched it as a collaborative platform, and so I'm able to partner with other artists and other storytellers to tell stories and do all of the things. And it was really important for me because I knew I wanted to work in archives, but I really didn't know how I wanted to engage with the archive. And so Black Archives allowed me to create this, you know, creative umbrella where I could, you know, do those things. The social media aspect of it, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, where we show up, that's typically my public research. So I'm very much hands-on with the archives and the collections that I'm finding. And I'm sharing that through Instagram, you know, through social media, so that, you know, if you're looking for, you know, something in the archives, I'm pointing you in a direction where you can find that. There's also a way in order for us to sustain ourselves, right? And so in those cases, we do partner with brands, we do partner with institutions, we do consulting, you know, anyone that's looking to tell the story, a specific Black story, you know, they typically reach out to us. And, you know, we can find the archives. If you're looking to, shoot a documentary, film project, you know, the archives are here to help elevate those stories. And so, yeah, that's my entry point.
Yeah, all beautiful experiences that really dictate kind of, you know, where we all come from, but also in in the space and the place of lineage. And also understanding where we are right now, talking about digital spaces, talking about, I know Black Market Vintage used to have a brick and mortar, and then transitioned to other spaces. Now y'all have the pop-up at Gladys, right? So like just being able to be mobile and being able to meet the moment where they are as part of this, the objects of storytelling, and being collectors, but also, as you say, Renata, right, being a living digital resource in real time and being responsive to what's happening. Raise your hand if you got a chance to check out the roadshow outside on your way in some capacity. Clap if you enjoyed just the experience of walking through. It's really interesting to think about how ordinary objects, I spent a lot of time, obviously, at the Black Panther table, just really going through and looking at, right, I'm always gonna come into the organizer space of like, looking at like, oh, actual demands, right? Having a 2-day conference, but actually having, like, we are here on this day with this objective to do this thing and have actual institutions back us up on the other side. And then you had other items, right, that were memorabilia, family photos, military, belongings and objects. And it's really interesting when you think about archiving, right, how ordinary objects from a newspaper to a photograph to a magazine becomes evidence, right, of Black life and Black experiences. And so being able to weave in some of what we saw out there, I would love, in your background and thinking about it, what was a moment, not necessarily particular to the roadshow, but just thinking about objects themselves, right? What was a moment when an object changed your understanding of Black history? And the role that those objects played in life, and how do such objects, ordinary things, right? And we'll also wrap this into the history of Arturo Schomburg, right? And kind of his background and how he became one of the greatest collectors of Black history and Black objects, right? Was because he was told at a young age, Black people have no history. So he spent his whole life dedicated to collecting things that other people consider ordinary objects, right? So what are some of those ordinary objects, or one ordinary object, because I feel like between y'all, we can stay here all night, one ordinary object that changed your understanding of history, and also invited in ancestral memories for you?
Who goes first? All right, so for me, there's a family Bible, a generational Bible, that it was sort of like that moment for me when I realized that I was meant to do something, right? There's this quote. Can y'all read that? Can you take it? I'm gonna ask you to take a minute just to read that quote. It's actually an excerpt from the Oxford American back in 2017. I was actually doing some work on my family. It was a housing development that my grandmother lived in. It was called Documenting Black Homes. I'm from Jacksonville, Florida. I live in Atlanta, so I'm Southern born and raised, right? And so I don't have that object here. And for a number of reasons. I think because that Bible is really special, it's sacred, right? I don't have a photo of it because it's been carried down from generation to generation. It was at the site of, when my aunt passed away, I brought it into the hospital room, and it was, laying on her bed as she took her last breath. And so for me, I think about all of the memories that are attached to that Bible, everything that it carries. My grandmother passed it down to, my grandmother inherited from her mother and her mother's mother and her mother's mother, right? And then so when my grandmother passed away, my mom inherited the Bible. And my mom is still living, thank God, but she knew how much, this work means to me. She passed it on to me while, she's still living so that I can sit with it as I do the work. But for the instance of tonight and why that, a photo of the Bible is not here, I think also about care when it comes to, the archives and, everything that's attached to that, right? And then also thinking about what the absence of the image still carries and that emotional weight, and then just having a certain discernment and energy about, what's private and, what's something that can be shared in the public. So, yeah, that's the thing that Bible is, it's really important to me, and that's the thing that changed the trajectory of my life, because in that Bible, I saw my name, and I really didn't know what that was, Yeah, so.
It's powerful. I can go next. This was tough for me because there is not a specific object. I have in one of the slides that is on rotation images of my mom, because again, I can't really think about, okay, that's me in the middle. Greasy 5-head, bun up, and mom. Not a Halloween. She's not a nurse or a doctor. I don't know why she's in this costume. This must have been for Halloween, and then mommy at the top. And this beaded purse is my grandmother's purse that has her name written in pen, her nickname, Alda. Her full name is Aldarina. And that is a purse that she gave me when I was a kid. And I think the photos of my mom and this purse really symbolize the role, similar to Renata, like the role that I have played in my family. I was very young when my grandmother gave me that purse. I don't know why she gave it to me. I know I like to play dress up and just be in her things. But she passed, a year and a half ago. And out of all of the cousins, like the really big family, like to have a thing, an object, something tangible to show for her presence and our relationship and her generosity and her style was just really, really special. And I wasn't even interested in vintage at the time, but I think that there's meaning there. And my mom and my dad gave me all of the family photos a few years ago, and partly because I promised to have not completed it yet, haven't gotten into it yet, but because I promised to find a way to preserve them and put them in books and organize them. There are tons of photos that have been printed over the years. And so in this gifting, bestowing of these objects to me, that reveals something about the ways that I am supposed to care for them, to show up for my family, to be a receiver and a keeper of these things. And so, yes, they are the objects, but they're also the ways that they were given to me that articulate something about my purpose in my family and my purpose in my work. That's what we're talking about.
And for me, so I know we didn't have a table outside, but I still had to do show and tell. So I have some things. But I would say the one item, or the one, I guess it would be like an allegory, is the banjo. Once I learned the true history of the banjo, for me, that was like such an eye-opening and like paradigm shift for me. So let me show you first, and then I'll explain more. So I'm not sure if y'all are familiar. The banjo comes from West Africa, originally called the banjar. There are other names for it because there are other stringed instruments along the west coast of Africa. But once the instrument came here, they would use whatever materials they had to make these stringed instruments. So this is actually a cigar box that they use to make a banjo. And then I have a big collection of banjos, but then this one is actually a bread pan that they made into a banjo. And so the reason why, anybody ever played the game Yellow Car? You know what that means? Anybody know what that means? That saying that if you say yellow car, if you're looking for a yellow car, then all you're gonna see are yellow cars on the road. That's what I call the banjo. It becomes a reminder for me of the ways that the power of a narrative shift, the power of attribution, and the power of history. Without knowing the history of the banjo, you may think that it was just just a piece of minstrel history, or just a piece of white Irish history, or just a piece of hillbilly culture that there are Grammy Awards that aren't there are ones for white people, there are ones for black people, but the ones for white people play the banjo, and the banjo is so far removed from black culture. But that idea that it is actually something that is rooted in our culture, in our story, that reclamation to me became so empowering. But every time I see a banjo, it is just a reminder that the power of who holds the narrative and who is telling the story. Mm-hmm.
Come on, show and tell. We affirm. So part of our work at Black Gotham Experience, we do that in the actual definition of pedagogy, meaning that we learn with our feet. Pedagogy, right, the foundation of the word pedagogy is foot. And so as storytellers, as historians, what we do is we take our writing, our research, and our work as artists, and we turn them into commission projects, into 15 different projects thus far, that tell the story of the African diaspora here in New York from 1624 onward. And so that is from when the Dutch arrived here with Portuguese ships, all the way up to one of our most recent projects, Buffalo Sonnet, which talks about the African, Latin, Puerto Rican culture in San Juan Hill, currently known as Lincoln Center. And we also have a project here in Harlem that goes from the Apollo Theater and ends here at the Schomburg called Kuzaliwa. And I bring in that backing and that framework to say that, right, everybody has a role in preservation, and we think about it in collection, we think about it in archiving, but oftentimes we are already doing the work, but sometimes it's just not named or recognized as the work. And part of our origin story is that Kamal Ware, the founder of Black Gotham Experience, was giving walking tours at the Tenement Museum as a, educated, degree educated, a scholar, and he had this class of young folks between the ages of 9 and 10, second graders, and he had this one little girl in this group where he was throwing out easy questions, like, what year did Christopher Columbus sail the ocean blue? 1492, just like easy things there to kind of bring her in. And this young black girl wasn't giving him any play, nothing, just stone-faced the whole time. And at the end, he's like, all right, thinking you do a good job, clap it up. And this one little black girl who had no questions the whole time, were like, yeah, but where are the black people? And here he had given the stories, right, of Ellis Island and New York City and Tenement and all these things. He had no answer for this little black girl. And that is the origin story of Black Gotham Experience. It led him down to do the research and the storytelling to find out what was the impact of the African diaspora here in Manhattan. When did we arrive here on the shores? What were our contributions in building up Broadway and building Wall Street, right, and building Trinity Church? What led us to flee Lower Manhattan and end up in places like Harlem or end up in places like Weeksville? And therefore, from there, created all these commissions and spaces that allows us to do the work that we do. And so when we're thinking about the ways in which we arrive to this work, and we think about the decentralized pathway that's taken to preserve history, how would you advise, and how do you currently advise your audiences to engage in the process in accessible ways? So for Black Gotham Experience, that's our walking tours, that's our audio experiences. How would you say that your work shapes that in a method of accessibility?
For us, in a number of ways. Folks can purchase, if they like to purchase.
I brought Kamal's daughter the ABCs that y'all just brought back.
Oh, yeah.
She's only 5 months old, but it's okay.
Okay.
Never too early.
That's great. I talked about the ways that our business has been expansive, and in that, we are always thinking about ways to make this work, our mission, accessible, and engage folks in the practice of thinking about and caring for Black material culture. We already do it, but it is about finding creative ways that folks can kind of meet at their different points of entry or their different levels of interest, et cetera. And so that might be, in our book actually, there's like a whole section where there are tips about how you can get involved and how you can learn about how to be a collector if you're interested in being a collector. And so some of that looks like starting at home. What is your family history? What are the objects that you have in your very home, in your attic, in your basement, at mom's house, at auntie's house? What are the things in the dining room, in that cabinet that you couldn't touch as a kid? What's under the plastic of the sofa? Like literally starting at home in a way that is very personal, informative. Simply like getting things off of your phone, printing things out, saving them in folders, saving things in files, images in multiple places, external hard drives, et cetera, writing on the backs of, writing in books, writing on photographs. Who is in the photographs? So that 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now, folks may make it a little easier on our descendants to know and capture some of that information. But those are some of the ways that we are reminding folks and teaching how they can engage in this work in their own ways.
Definitely. And I love the premise of the question, the piece about how we've been doing this work already. And I think for me sometimes, and we talk about it like he said in the book, is putting some respect on some of our ancestors' names who have been doing this work. And so it was a joke and a buzzword, plastic on the sofa, but how many of these couches were preserved by that same plastic on the sofa? Like your grandma was a preservationist. She was saving that couch. She was trying to.
Hello?
For real though, for real. She was trying to, sustain that value for future. You know, the idea of the china cabinet that you couldn't touch. You know, my grandmother, one of the happiest moments she had was being able to each give us a Wedgwood china bowl. And I'm just like, okay, thanks, Grandma. But also that's where they saw value. And so don't touch it because this is yours and that's yours, but it's in the shelf and you can't touch it. So we've been doing the work, and I think if we just change some of the ways that we look at the work that has been done, that it will actually open up new ways for us to continue doing that work. Someone had earlier mentioned Jet and Ebony magazines, and my grandmother had so many. She was moving into a retirement home, and I was tasked with helping her go through and throw them out. And I was just like, why do you have so many? And she was like, well, if I wanted to know what happened 5 months ago, she was like, I don't have that computer thing. I mean, this is back in early 2000, but she was like, I don't have that computer thing. I can look in these magazines. And I just like, wait. So she had basically these almanacs in her living room that she can go back and look at what happened. And so I'm just like, it's no longer I'm looking at her as a hoarder. I'm like, okay, well, no, she's a librarian. No longer am I looking at you as like you have OCD, but no, you're actually trying to keep the value of this couch. So I just think if we change the way we view the past, it will actually help us change the way we view the future.
Yeah, everything they said, and I'll also say that this book, it's largely sourced from the community, our online community on Instagram. So I published Black Archives in 2023. So from 2019 to 2021, we did an open call for submissions, and all of the family, everyone, that's part of the Black Archives community at that particular time, submitted their family photos. So it's just a nod to, we have been doing the work, right? And so this book is filled with families across the African diaspora, Black American families in the South and the West. In addition to my own, I actually bring in my own family photos into the book as well. And so it just shows this collective family photo album of how all of these families have been doing the work. I'll also say that when it comes to, we want to make sure that we're collecting the stories of our elders. Important. Videos, photographs, but also thinking outside of the box in that, because like our present, like there's something about documenting ourselves at this particular time, because right now, the present is a future history, right? And so making sure that we all know that, our present selves at this very particular time, that's important, that's worthy of documenting, so I would say continue to prioritize our elders, but also make sure that we're included in that documentation as well. But yeah, that's something that we can do. And it doesn't have to be, like a standard, all right, grandma, like sit in front of the camera, answer these questions, right? It can be really engaging and, you can put your own little spin to it, so that they're giving us something that shows their personality, something that shows who they are, aside from, what's your favorite color, or, give me a time when, so.
Yeah. Yeah, we're going to actually stick on where we are right now, thinking about these non-traditional entry points and thinking about access and thinking about visibility, thinking about the ways in which we utilize social media, but also storefronts or pop-ups or kiosks, and so thinking about all those different ways that we come into archiving, come into preservation. I really appreciate the reframing on OCD and plastic. That's dope. I'm gonna take that one. But just also thinking about the here and the now as you're talking about, Renata. And so coming back to you, and then going back to the handies. How have you seen historical references and nostalgia impact pop culture? Here and now, I think, right, it just came out that was like most of Gen Z slang is actually like black slang or just black vernacular at large. That just came out last week, but that's a different conversation and talk. But how have you seen historical references and nostalgia impact pop culture, definitely from the Black experience?
I mean, it's everywhere, right? Like, you can't separate. You can't separate. Okay. I see how this is coming together.
You see how we set you up there?
All right, so every February, for the past, I want to say 5-6 years, we have been partnering with Link NYC, and we get to celebrate Black New Yorkers. It is probably one of my favorite projects, one of my favorite partnerships, because we do an open call, around January, and we get a lot of submissions, and it's I don't know, like, we get a lot of submissions, so it's sort of a challenge trying to narrow down which ones but I really love this, and I think that the way that we incorporate, so there's actually like two different things I'm trying to talk on right now, right? But, okay, and this too, right? Like, all right, so what I want to get to is the community that we've been able to cultivate through Black Archives. And I guess the touch points, social media, right? That's typically the front facing, that's the thing that people are, it's most visible. And so you see us through social media. But I think also, walking down the street and coming across a Link NYC kiosk and seeing a Black family, right there, meeting you where you are, wherever you are, within the city, that's pretty, I think that's pretty powerful and one of the things that I love. But I also love the idea of bringing in the family stories, through, we did a editorial, and that was one of the things where it's not necessarily just my family, but it's, our community's family, right? And just showing how that shows up in history, pop culture. I think that's all I want to say on that.
I think in terms of like non-traditional entry points, and one of the interesting things about the folks who, our clientele or the folks who follow us, there are a lot of creators. So a lot of writers, filmmakers, TV writers, actors. And one of the ways that was it was a surprise to us and something that we didn't quite plan for, but the costume designer for Insecure reached out. We had worked with her on previous projects, and she said, I need you to pull some shirts for this project I'm working on. We're like, cool, great. We kind of go into contract, find out what the project is, and we're like, and this is like season 2 at this point. So we were like, ooh, and Lawrence. We were like, oh, we got to get shirts for Lawrence and for Molly. And also just like to be tapped for that and to be such fans of the show. was really affirming because they can get any designer, they can go anywhere to get shirts, but the fact that they came to source through us to get shirts that were not only vintage, because that was the point of it, to get vintage tees, but to get things that were culturally specific and like that, you know, if you know, you know, and you'll get the reference. And so it was fun to have just a little bit of a play in that and finding cool shirts that can help support the plot line. But that was just one really simple and small way that I was just like, wow, well, you know, people have, you know, started following us or reached out to us like, hey, I didn't even know that this kind of business was an option. And so I think sometimes just starting with making yourself known and putting yourself out there so people see history as an option, I think that really is the first step, because while some people might see it as limiting, I see the wormhole of history as like infinite. And once you go down it, I think the possibilities are endless.
Agreed. We know the world does not move without Black folks, Black creativity. And so you can just watch TV, you can listen to the radio, you can go see a film and see so much of us over here, eavesdrop on a conversation, just hear so much of us and our history and the nostalgia and sometimes a lack of crediting, but if you know, you know. So I think that the costuming has been a really surprising and really fascinating way that we get to bridge nostalgia and the contemporary. There were a few other slides. We did a collab with Adidas last year, I believe, and they have what's called a Global Archivist Program, and they were looking to revamp the Kareem Abdul-Jabbar iconic high-top sneaker. And it was just really beautiful we went to their headquarters in LA and met with designers and saw vintage versions of these shoes, the original joints, in varying, stages of wear and condition. And they made this new shoe look like the old shoe. So like literally designing with patina in mind, not designing a crisp white sneaker, but something that has a little bit of that yellow tone so it looks worn. And so I think in so many ways, we are not the collective we, like Black folks, certain brands, corporations, organizations are looking to look back in order to move forward. They're looking back because nostalgia is felt. And I think our public memory is like quite short, but to have these reminders to look back and to acknowledge and to kind of learn the things that are kind of recycled and reimagined, it's just the way culture moves. So I see nostalgia in so much around us. There was also another slide, I think, of Sinners and folks comparing the Sinners, some of the scenes to like Ernie Barnes' work. And so again, if you know, you know, but the references are always there. And I love looking at the history of the Schomburg Center and Schomburg's collection, other collectors' work as collecting these receipts. They're the receipts that folks have been here, been doing this work in various ways. We've been living, and so, yeah.
I attach actually that if you know, you know, to lived experience, you know, because very similar to when we do like archival production, you know, the role of an archival producer, let's say for a documentary or a film project, you know, you're doing a lot of researching. And I want to say last year, I don't know if do you remember Seen and Heard, the history of Black television? It was like an Issa Rae. Okay, so I was an archival producer on that project, and one of the really interesting things about being on set, as you can be on set, is, you know, when you're working with other archival producers who are not Black, you know, trying to tell this story versus someone who is Black, right? And so what we're able to tap into is a more nuance, because we live that, right? And so we can think back and be like, oh, okay, that makes sense. You know, let me go find this. As opposed to someone who may not have had that lived experience. Yes. And so it's more, I don't know, secondhand. But you can actually, as a viewer, you can actually see that, you know, when you're actually watching the documentary, not that particular documentary, but anything in general. You can tell when, you know, maybe there's an archival producer, you know, that is just looking for archival material as opposed to someone who actually lived that experience or, you know, has a firsthand into that. And so that, if you know, you know, that's that lived experience. It's very nuanced, and I think that also helps, I guess, to kind of wrap up your pop culture television.
Yes, and I think as I'm listening to you, I'm just thinking about our last question also, like the different roles and everyone having a different role in the work of collecting and preserving. Not everyone needs to be a collector. Like, we talk to folks about this all the time, and they're like, you know, I'm a collector, but I don't like clutter. Like, I'm averse to things, even though I collect things, and so I'm constantly just grappling. But there are many folks who are like, I can't do the clutter. I'm very sensitive spiritually. I can't even go in vintage shops. I can't go in antique stores. Like, I don't want to bring that stuff in my house, but I recognize the value and the importance, and I want to support other folks. So, you know, while this work is done in community, I think we need to be operating at different entry points. I'm thinking about the individual collector. I'm thinking about our institutions, our cultural institutions, our museum collections, thinking about folks who are buying and selling, the folks who are out at flea markets, the folks who are maybe doing estate sales. And when a matriarch of a Black family passes, who is handling the estate, the items in that home? Are they just going to, you know, the landfill? Is a junker coming in to take everything out, or is someone going in first to manage and maybe bring things to a museum? Or, you know, like, we get to choose the way that we want to engage memory and history, and that's really exciting because I'm thinking about the work of an archival producer and folks who don't even know that that's a thing. Like, I get to engage the archives to make this production more authentic and genuine and felt. There's just so much opportunity, and not everyone needs to be a collector, you know? We don't all have to operate from the same vantage point, and that's a benefit.
You said so much and so much goodness. If you know, you know. But then thinking about, and I think this is a really good way to move into kind of our last two-ish questions. We will take some questions from the audience, so use the next two questions to think about if you have some burning thoughts and kind of bringing them out here. But you brought up a really valid point that I think that we're seeing across the space. You have the modernity, you have what contemporarily is happening of the resurgence of something like a Centers. That is very much wrapped up in that banjo, right? It's very much wrapped up in all the historical storytelling, the music scene, and all that it references, right? And then you have a project like Black Archives that is activating, you know, the social media platform in a way for allowing it to be an access point for Black history to be seen in the public square. We've lost the public square, but the current public square we have are the link systems, right? That you see these kiosks on the streets that you walk by, and you're able to walk down any street in New York at that point in time and see a Black family from Brooklyn, see a Black family from Queens, and be reminded, right, of the consistent footprint that we've had in this concrete place. And so I'm thinking about, and we're thinking about, you know, considering all of that, considering the beauty and the joy and the possibility of your role, we also are in this political moment, and I think we'd be remiss to not bring up what we all see currently happening with the consideration of the escalation of violence from the state on Black archives, specifically in federal spaces and repositories and institutions. Is it time to think about where these archival treasures should live in the near future? As we're cleaning out grandma's house, as we're cleaning out the matriarch's house, is it time to really think about where these things will live and how your work sits alongside spaces like the Schomburg and the institutionalization of such treasures? So thinking about, right, how do we bolster interest in traditional institutional entry points as well? We have the kiosks, we have the Instagram, we have the archival producer, the new age, right? But also, how do we continue to invest in the importance of traditional institutional entry points for our community?
I think, like, continuing programming like what we're having tonight, community heirlooms, working with the Schomburg Center and that, and also making sure that we have multiple homes for our archives and not just relying on federal, that we have the community archives, that we have the independently funded archives, the collections, and that when the federal archives are at risk of erasure, and what we're seeing right now, that the community is the community is going to sustain us, right? And so it's important for us to kind of think about our roles and how we can contribute. Yeah.
I'm in thinking about this question, I'm thinking about one of the roles that we both have. We sit on the board of the Weeksville Heritage Center in Brooklyn. And for me, it's a really interesting intersection as a private collector and a dealer of things to also be part of the work that Black cultural institutions are doing with lots of eyes and lots of resource, also sometimes lots of bureaucracy and restriction and red tape, but just to be furthering the mission in a different home, in a different house, in a different set of rules to play by, and a team. And so I think that our history and our liberation requires all of us to be in these different places, similar to what I just said, in the institutions, at home. And I do think it is past time to consider where our objects live and how we care for them and how we protect them. And it's not just our current administration. I mean, for as long as Black folks have been here, we have had to deal with state-sanctioned violence, et cetera. And so nothing about this climate is new for us. And as I'm talking about political climate, I'm also thinking about climate as well, our climate concerns. Water, I'm thinking about gentrification. I'm just thinking about all of the issues that concern us. And so yes, I think we're past that time. And there are many organizations who are doing the work to educate folks about where in your home should you keep your things, not in your basement, not in your attic, to contend with all of the different issues. And I'll end it there. Thank you.
And for me, I think we need to continue to decentralize history. And that idea of not everything, they chain the doors up to the Smithsonian in DC, that history is then all lost. But then what does it mean if we have some of those pieces in our collection? Renata has some of those pieces in her private collection. So many things have survived because they've been living in people's individual collections. And so I think bolstering that right now is so important. But also, like Kei said, it's past time. There's a part of me where sometimes in interviews people will ask, well, what should we do now? And it's like, they ask, what are you doing now? Like, how are you shifting how you're working in this new administration? And I'm like, with pride, it's not shifting anything. We've been doing this. We've been saving our history and protecting our archives and creating archives because we know that the assaults are sometimes under the surface or the assaults are big, broad swings. And so we know that is a truth that we have to contend with. And lastly, I would also say technology, I think, is something that we really have to lean into in ways that they can't just, chain up our history, with a padlock. We're gonna have to lean into that.
Build our own systems, right? And then maintain ownership, making sure that we're maintaining that ownership. I think that's important, so.
Yeah.
All of those things. So I'm going to ask my last question. So if you are an audience member, there are microphones, and we will be bringing them around. So my last question from on my side is just on that last note that we were just talking about, right? knowing that we're sitting in a space dedicated to an individual person's collection, what is one thing that we should all be doing today to prepare the archives of the future? What is one thing that we all should be doing today to prepare the archives for the
Print
future?
the photos, right? Print the photo. And then you said this earlier, you like write the caption, but treat it as a journal entry. You know, if you want to do something different, you know, if you're utilizing a photo book or if you are on like a photo album, making sure that that caption is there. If it ever gets separated from the image, write it on the back. That way that the story is always attached. They're married, right? I just happen to have this, but yeah, print out the photos, frame the photo, right? Look at the photo and reflect on what's not there, like, or what's invisible in the photo, something that you know, something that you feel. We got to be more intentional. I have to be more intentional about that. Like I have a lot of photos, and my daughter, she's so funny because she's like, Mom, where are all my like baby pictures? And I'm like, girl, in my phone, on my drive. And she's like, okay, well, I can't see them. So every now and then I'll kind of, you know, go through a time where, you know, I'll start sending her a bunch of photos. But what I have been doing, like I did with our family home videos and digitized those, is I have created, you know, a folder, a drive. So start with the drive, right? And then, you know, back that up, use a hard drive, or you could start with the iCloud or a cloud. But, you know, and then, I don't know, sometimes my memory is bad. So, I mean, I don't know what's going to happen, you know, 10, 15 years if you're going to remember every single thing. But, like, you know, just do as much as you can, because you know we're leaving these materials, you know, to the next generation, and they need something to work with.
Definitely. And definitely on that point about the next generation, for me, I think one of the first steps is a shift in our values and what we see as value. Because capitalism tells us it is just the money piece. It is, how much can I get from this? How much will it go at auction? How much has it sold for? And I think so much of that is so limiting, and that becomes only certain types of artifacts, only certain types of vintage items then get saved. And so starting there, what has stuck with me, and I can't see if they're still here, but the Calypso Hop folks who were at the table, the young man and young lady who were out there, but they had the military and police cap and baton. And what struck me is that someone had to save those hats and that baton way back then. And not just save it, someone then had to preserve it. Then someone had to save it from a spring cleaning, then a summer cleaning, then another winter cleaning. So someone saw value enough to keep it that whole time, enough to where their grandson and their offspring, I wasn't sure the exact relation, enough so that their offspring now are here telling their story through their material culture. And so seeing that shift of value from generation to generation, I think is so important, because it's free. You don't have to go and buy anything. You don't have to go on eBay. You don't have to go anywhere else. You can start with the artifacts that you have in your own home. And I think that's so valuable. But if we can start to see it as valuable, then we'll start to act like it.
I love that. I was going to say print out the photos, but I will add one thing that we can do. I would say, is there someone that you can either write a card or a letter or a postcard to? I send I love sending a long text. I like writing a novel. Okay? I like a long text. I also love handwriting a letter, a love note, this is how I am, a journal entry. Journaling is not a regular practice for me anymore, but there was a time where, like, just documenting my days, and more recently documenting dreams, just the writing down is a really important practice, you know, for you, but then for the people who come after you who might find said letters or said journals. So moving beyond the Notes app and the texts, are there letters that you can write, or is there paper and pen that you can spend some time writing some things down and then holding on to them or gifting them to someone else? Small thing, but I think it's really valuable and important.
So,
And I want to add one thing.
okay, come on, 3.5.
Okay. If there are some folks in your family that you can talk to about their lives in a way that they're open to, try to do that. History is not back here, and just a thing of the past. Like history is now, and there are so many folks who are carrying stories and lived experiences that we may or may not be aware of. I mentioned my mom in the beginning of this, but as we were publishing our book last year, my mom was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And so at a time where I was thinking a lot and working around this concept of memory in our work, I was and still am contending in a very real way around my mom's loss of memory. And it has shifted what I think about how fickle memory is, because they go, but also they're in the body, and they hold so much. So I think if there are folks whose stories you're interested in knowing, or just like you want to have them documented, ask them, find a way to record or to write down and transcribe so that you to hold on to those folks a little bit longer and whatever it is that they're holding.
Thank you for sharing that. All right, we're gonna make some space for a few questions from the audience. If there are, can we get okay. I see one right here, this is the first person, and I see 2 and 3. One right here in this back row.
Hello.
Hi.
Thank you all so much for sharing your insights on preservation. My question is regarding, once you've collected all these items, what are some methods you guys have sort of accumulated to maintain? So whether it be a certain kind of boxes, I know for photography, but what does it look like to withhold sort of just, what is the word I'm looking for? Like a bit more object like a banjo. Where do you store these items that you've collected?
Well, I mean, we have archival boxes, and then we have, of all sizes, because we have things as small as photos. We use plastic bins. Some people are on the fence about if you should use them or not. The key with plastic is if you have it in the right climate. That really is the big difference. We have items that are, we have pinball machines. I can't get the pinball machine in the crate. So some things we just have to have in spaces that are temperature controlled. We also have a number of storage units, but that's because our collection is so big. For us, I would say for you, it'll be important to start with just what do you have before you run out and buy things. So you can protect a lot of what you already have with the items that you have at home. So whether you think about photos, one easy thing is your photos, if they're not in an album, I would then put them in an album. But if they're up back to back or up against each other, that's one of the first things you can do is separate your photos, because there have been countless photos that I'll come and they're all stuck together, you can't see them. And so that's something very simple and free, so that's, I would say, an easy place to start.
I also think it depends on what your goals are for those things. There are, like Jay mentioned, there are definitely many things in boxes, things that are wrapped up, things that are in cases, and preserved, protected. There is so much of our collection that we live amongst because we love these items. They're beautiful to us, they're storied, and we like to live amongst our things. I also feel like that is it's a very Black thing, thinking about our homes and our spaces that are curated and decorated with intention. So They live amongst us. The banjos are on the wall. There are banjos on the wall in our home. These will soon be mounted as well. But if you have, if there's a multi-level home, a level that's not in the basement or prone, it just depends on the situation, prone to water or anything like that. Like, I would be less likely to leave things out there, but if you're the type of person who wants to see these objects and wants to invest in framing, UV resistant plexi, museum glass to get things framed to protect them from fading and UV rays, then you can mount that on your wall. It really just, it depends.
And I actually do that a lot, framing, but I don't always hang the images up, whatever the pictures are. So, it becomes, part of the decor as well.
I'm going to preface my question with the observation. I'm a story healer, not a storyteller. It's a fundamental difference. Story healer, not a storyteller. And since you put up Octavia Butler, we got to go to Zolanier Hurston. Zolanier Hurston said, we are dramatic people. Everything we do is dramatic, including our insanity. In telling our story, you got to use Zolanier Hurston. Octavia Butler get into it. Octavia Butler about our stories, because we are the people that made bad good.
Okay, I should.
Thank you.
No comment. We have the microphone. If you want a question, there's a microphone back there.
Hi. Oh, heavens. My name is Moses Harper. I'm with blacklesbian.org, and I have it's a long question. As white terrorists have made it a legacy to consistently show up and exploit archives of ours that they have come across through being grave robbers and invading our countries, and using magic that we've come up with, our physics, our chemistry, our astrology, against us. Outside of archiving and looking over our records for nostalgia, which I do believe we absolutely have 100% the right to own these things, how have you witnessed, or do you envision even future generations making use of some of our powerful inventions and understanding of creation in a way so that we can interrupt this whole plan for us to continue to be exploited economically, culturally, systematically, and whateverly? Please.
I think the young folks, they are actively doing the work on campuses, a lot of them. I know, for example, my daughter, she recently graduated from Spelman, and her last, so her last semester, she actually brought, we held a workshop on campus where there were a classroom full of Black women, looking to figure out and, different ways to engage with the archives so that they can, preserve that, right, in their way, right? I will also say that, so they're already doing the work on the campus. I think we just need to tap into that and help them and making sure that we're extending ourselves, where is possible, whenever I can go onto a campus. My thing isn't necessarily, pay me to do that, right? I understand the urgency in that, so I'm like, if you guys can make a way for me to be there and show up, and we have the resources, and then we show up, we're on the campus, and they're already actively, doing the work and already, collecting, and they're already thinking about the future, and they're already activating and engaging. So I think we just need to rely on that.
And for me, I think one of the undercurrents of our work, and personally one of the undercurrents of my work, is just I see that the severance of us from our history is such a big reason why we are still in some of the states that we are right now. The severance of us as a people from the land has a lot to do why we are in some of the states that we are in now. And so starting to heal and reclaim some of those connections for me is invaluable. And so not just thinking about a banjo or just thinking about, a Zora Neale Hurston book, but thinking about what does a lineage and a history with these material evidences mean to a child who's being bombarded by images that tell them that you have no place in this country, and actually the people who look like you who were here before didn't really do much here anyway. And so I think that is the piece where it's just like we have to continue to strengthen those bonds, because we're still going to be bombarded in new ways, in unfortunate ways, in strong ways. The pendulum's going to keep on swinging. But that idea that we have to be strong and reclaim our histories, I think is such a big piece that we're missing, and what will help us move forward.
Yeah.
Ditto.
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 Ditto. No, go ahead. The one thing I would add from the Black Gotham Experience mindset is in doing the work that we do here in New York City, we oftentimes have youth come in from universities. Universities are our #1 clients who bring their youth to campuses, and then it's the K through 12 kids that come in through our spaces for our walking tour experiences. And oftentimes, as we're telling the history, we do have to know as native New Yorkers the gap in the education system of learning about the importance and the experience of Black folks here. And so I remember we had a walking tour of students from the Bronx, and we're doing our regular walking tour around, we're based in Wall Street, the Seaport, right, Financial District, FIDI. Black folks don't hang out down there, you know what I'm saying? And so we had kids from the Bronx, and we're doing our regular talking through what Wall Street originally was, and the slave market was here, but talking about Wall Street in this very common language, or just like accessible language. And we had the teacher who had to pause us and say, wait, you have to explain the history of Wall Street to kids from the South Bronx. You're talking about Wall Street, stock exchange, stock market, all of that type of stuff. You have to slow down and actually slow down and bring it back a little bit for them to be able to catch up with you when you're talking about 1600s, 1700s. And so sometimes we have as people right now in modernity, we have the privilege and the gift of foresight. We know history. Yeah. So we assume and we engage with people in this way as if they are in the same exact space that we are. And so as historians, as archivists, as storytellers, sometimes it is slowing down and taking the moment to slow down to catch people up to where you are and turning some of that rage, rightful rage, righteous rage, right, as Brittany Cooper would say, but slowing down to catch people up to where you are so that they can join you in that resistance battle, because oftentimes we're talking to people as if we have a shared language, and we actually don't. Mm-hmm. And so I would offer that up as well as a way to push back. I see you here, yes?
No, it's okay. We have time. These are 2 questions. So we're gonna go this way, and then we're gonna go here.
Hi, hello. I think you just made a point.
Could you step a little closer to the mic? Thank you.
Sorry, is this better? Okay, so I think you talked a little bit about the question I was about to ask, because just to give a little background, I grew up in a very privileged environment, but I also grew up in a very hood environment. And so my dad would take kids from my neighborhood to museums and to different things just on his own, because he understood that they wouldn't get an opportunity otherwise. But it was a different time. And so for individuals or people who have that knowledge, who maybe aren't part of a museum or don't have an archive, but have the knowledge themselves, what can we do to reach out and kind of connect for kids or for even people who are our age or a little bit younger who don't understand how important this work is? Mm-hmm. But you do. Mm-hmm. But you want to do something. What would you suggest?
Yeah. Could we put that question and this question together for the sake of time?
I'm going to ask you to also ask your question, and then we'll take both of them on the panel.
I think maybe some of the things she just said I can answer. So I'm an artist and art handler, did a lot of things throughout life. I want to just say that I commend you all for, taking this on and appreciating your ancestors. I got some hard heads in my family, so I don't know if they're getting it. I just want to say that if you have things that you need to archive, you can go and check out Michael's, Blick. They have a lot of different materials there, for you to get those boxes and things like that. and they have good prices. Many of you might be familiar with the old TV show Family Matters with Urkel. There was an episode about the quilt. I think our people need to get back to that. If you got a lot of fabrics, somebody's military uniform, T-shirts from concerts, you can make it into a quilt. You don't have to put it on the wall. I mean, on your bed. You could put it on the wall. You could throw it over the chair. Okay, but it should tell a story of people in the family or just yourself if you're an individual. Bronx Council on the Arts is another place, a good resource. They have workshops there. They're on the Grand Concourse and 165th Street. They're starting some workshops now for artists to get people involved. And they also do a history project over there as well. So there's a lot of different things, a lot of different ways to protect your items. You just have to go looking for it and be, cautious about the prices and things like that. Vitrines, okay, a vitrine, it's like a stand and it has like the plastic. You can build it yourself to put like statues up under, any type of keepsake that is not something to put on the wall. You put it in a vitrine, okay? So I hope that helped y'all out a little bit. I'm still trying to figure out what to do with my stuff, even though I have some background. There's something called estafoam and ectofoam. You can build a box, and then you have to cut like say my mother was a beautician, so I have to protect her tools. So that means I would have to take a curling iron, and I'd have to do the measurements, and then cut it into this foam so that it would fit in there just right. And then you can make a vitrine out of that, or you could send it somewhere, and it's protected. Okay, bubble wrap is your best friend as well.
So what I'm going to say is, if you love all of the resources that this artist here is offering us, please make sure you connect with them after this program, because I suspect that there are a few more homegrown ideas that they may have for us as well. So thank you for that comment, and thank you for the question that was asked. And that was going to be the last question, so if you all could take that. Sure. It was about folks who, yes. Okay.
So I think this brings me back to the piece that I said before. It's like, you just have to expose them to it. I think that's such a big piece of it. I think about my daughter she's 15, and she grew up going to flea markets, like while we were vending, going shopping, like she grew up in it. And there was, you want to take over the family business? You love this, right? Isn't that cool? And she's like, no, this is old stuff. And I was like, wow, this is my fault. But she was like, no, I hate it. And then, last year at some point, she was just like, well, yeah, I guess I do pay attention because I have to take over the family business. And I'm like swerving in the car crying, because I'm just like, but it was on her own time. I couldn't force her to have an interest in it. She really got into it because we kept going to the thrift store, and then she kept buying cool clothes and able to see that she was able to express her identity in those things. So it's really just keep exposing the youth to history, to material culture. I think that is so important, and show them ways that they can express their own identity. And so it's not just like, hey, you like this picture, hey, you like this book, but like, hey, you like to skateboard, right? Well, let me tell you about these black skateboarders from Brooklyn in the 80s. And so like, make it accessible, make it interesting. I think that's so important. But then also in the next couple of months, we're gonna have some interesting ways that kids can engage with history, because I think there need to be more conversations around Black history that are not just like workbooks, but like fun. So stay tuned.
I also think really briefly, my sister's a guidance counselor at a school in the Bronx, and she organizes the career day every year. And she's just like, okay, I'm sure doctor, sure attorney, I just need entrepreneurs and creatives and artists and folks who are doing work that isn't necessarily incentivized or,
Mainstream.
Or mainstream or traditional, et cetera, conventional, to expose kids to. And I think with kids, it really it's the long game. It is planting the seeds. And at least two of us up here have talked about the seeds that were planted when we were young. in items that were given to us, or in seeing our names written somewhere and having that sense of curiosity that was piqued. And so I think it really is the long game and planting seeds, burying the medicine for them. You know, a museum might be stuffy to a kid, but a flea market or an antique store might be a little bit more interesting, or like an outdoor market where there's snacks and things to look at and to be engaged in might be a really interesting alternative as opposed to a museum. Both are important, but I think just really being creative about the relationship you do have to kids and planting the seed being the expectation.
Did anybody else want to respond to that before we wrap up?
No, I agree. Similar to, you know, what you mentioned with my daughter, you know, from the time that she was young, all of the, you know, talks like this, she would be front row, so I could see her. But, you know, just introducing, you know, her into these spaces at a young age, and then just allowing that curiosity, that natural curiosity, kind of just, you know, to take shape on their own. And you know, once you plant the seeds, you know, they'll bloom, right? And so it's just a matter of not forcing it, and just allowing it to happen on their own terms.
Thank you all for those really thoughtful responses to the questions that were asked. If I may, just for a moment, connect a few dots. I appreciated sort of hearing the idea of ordinary objects and different entry points, right? And so part of this conversation and part of the reason why we had the showcase was to show sort of like what are in people's homes and then what ends up in our archives, right? What ends up in our exhibitions. And sometimes people think that we collect simply, you know, sort of names that you know, like a James Baldwin or a Maya Angelou. But the fact of the matter is that it is filled in by regular people who have been keeping all kinds of things throughout their history. So not just simply their family stories, but just their times, right? Just the people who have collected things over time, and it helped to fill in the stories, right? So when you see that picture of Martin Luther King Jr. on the mall, you might have a family member who was also there and who could tell you about what it meant to take that trip, right? To take that journey, and who were the people around them, or what were the car that they were driving when they went there. So one, we wanted to bridge the gap between that, between the ordinary objects and how they then end up in an institution like ours, and why we value them. The other thing that I wanted to mention is, as we talk about engaging young people, of course, I have to give a shout out to our Junior Scholars Program, because we very much believe in developing Black history scholars at every age, right? And what scholar means may be different at different levels, right? But it doesn't mean that you are not taking in information and are able to put it back out in the world. And what the young people who participate in this Saturday free program at the Schomburg Center is that they do get to go in the collections, and sure, they might be bored for a little while, but then their end project is putting all of those skills to work, and sometimes it might be a creative endeavor, it's an exhibition, it might be poetry, they do conferences, they do all kinds of things, and so they're taking that knowledge and they're putting it to work, and that's some of what we are also asking people to do through our salon series, but also Christopher Stallings, who is in here, who is in the room, who was also had a table. Hey, Christopher, you know, he creates zines as well, right? And so I think we forget about all the ways that we could be doing this archiving work that's not about simply preserving the one object at a time, but right, how are we telling those stories? And sometimes it will be the zine that does that, right? It might be a scrapbook. But the ways in which we can incorporate it into our lives, whether or not it's creative or everyday, in addition to your journal entries and such. One of the ways that I love postcards. I ask my friends to send me postcards. I had a friend with whom we would just send postcards between like Maryland and New York, and sometimes it would be about the postcard, or it would just be a way to like send a note to each other. And I'm so grateful to still have those postcards. And at some point, who knows, nobody may care about them, but I care about them for now, and perhaps somebody will come across them. The last thing that I mentioned, that I'll mention that was said here as well, is that community will sustain us, and that is the truth. Make no mistakes about it. The museum in Washington, D.C. is filled with other people's attic treasures, right? And so it was because community kept those things around that that museum even exists today, right? And so whether or not you're able to put your things in a museum, just know, and Renata, who was also finding photographs, right? Like, people's things end up in these other places, right? But if you want to be able to tell your own story, it then becomes imperative that you or your friends or your family members are also thinking about what are those key items. We recognize that not everybody can afford a storage. You might not be able to have space for all the things, even though you want to have all the things. And sometimes it's just identifying what are some of those key things. I rescued/theft a few photographs from my grandparents' house long before they had both passed away, because I wasn't really sure that my aunts and uncles would value those photographs the way that I did, because they always sat in a place when I grew up, and who knew that my grandmother's house would no longer be in the family, right? And so it was just my own little rescue attempt. And so I have my own little small archive of things that I've kept, and I'm grateful that I did that, because I now have them. And then when people ask, I'm like, I do have it. And they're like, well, why did you take it? I was like, because I'm the one who cares about it. And they're like, okay. Right? And that was just that, right? And so just thinking about that. The last thing that I wanted to mention, Jess Neal is in the house, who is an independent archivist and founder of Vanguard. And you were talking about the different jobs that people can have in this space. And again, it's not always about being the collector. You might just need somebody to help you organize them. Right? And there are people who do that. There are people who do it for a fee. There are people who do it for a low fee. There might just be somebody in your family who is very good at that. And when you start to do that sooner rather than later, you have a greater chance of figuring out what is important to different parts of your family or different parts of your friend group. So I just highly encourage that. And then the last thing that I'll say, sorry, I was getting there, is that institutions get better because of interactions by the community. The Schomburg Center is free, right? So coming to our collections, all you need is a library card. For some divisions, you do need to have an appointment. Some of the rules and regulations around how you handle things or come in are about preservation of those materials, right? And they help us to ensure that they may be here for a little bit longer. But also something that I've noticed Jess do, we both are affiliated with Cave Canem. Jess happens to be the archivist there, but they also teach institutions how to better engage with communities and or people who have given their archives to those institutions, right? And so you can hold institutions accountable to how they treat you or how they treat the archive once it comes into the house. But also once we understand or better understand how you engage with them, we get better as well, but we also remain around for another 100 years. So with that said, thank you all for listening to me for 2 seconds, but I just needed to point all of that out, because that is why we are here. And we hope that this is the entry point, but we hope the Schomburg Center helps to illuminate even more around archives. And even if we don't, I hope that you will continue these conversations online, in the lobby, certainly long after this particular conversation in this room. We will have a book signing with our guests who are on the stage. I didn't mention Renata's book, but the title of their book is Black Archives, A Photographic Celebration of Black Life. Again, we have Black Market Vintage's book. They're both in our pop-up shop outside, and there will be a book signing. Please give yourselves a round of applause for listening. And thank you all so much for all the work that you do. Have a good evening.